Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
If you've learned nothing else from me, you should know by now that the law takes time. The mills of the gods grind slow, my friend. However, once in a while, if you wait long enough, good things do happen. And here we go. Out of Kansas, the story we've been following about the newspaper there, from the Associated Press, John Hanna wrote it, and Joshua, H. Robert, Chris, and Mike were among the first to send it to me. Prosecutors plan to charge former Kansas police chief over his conduct following the newspaper raid. So the cop in charge is going to get in trouble, or at least he's going to be tested in court. Two special prosecutors said that they plan to charge a former Central Kansas police chief with obstruction of justice over his conduct following a police raid last year on the local weekly newspaper. Prosecutors wrote a 124-page report and said that the staff at the Marion County Record committed no crimes before the former Marion police chief led a raid on its offices and the home of its publisher. They said that the police warrants signed by a judge to allow the searches contained inaccurate information from an inadequate investigation, and that the searches were not legally justified. Now, remember when I did the story the first time, I had people say, but Steve, shouldn't the judge get in trouble? Well, to get a warrant, somebody fills out an affidavit, signs it, and swears to the truth of it. And the affidavit will often say things like, I saw this happen, I saw that happen, we heard this, we saw this. Based on all of this, we deserve a warrant to go do that. So the police chief or people underneath him filled out these affidavits, submitted them to a judge, the judge signed it, and now the prosecutors say, well, based on the affidavits, it made sense that the judge signed it, but the affidavits themselves were wrong. And I've heard of that too. And so sometimes police get a little overzealous because they think, well, here's the deal. If we fill the affidavit out and we fudge it a little bit and we get the warrant and we go search the place and find stuff, people are going to kind of forget that the affidavits were weak. So police body camera footage of the raid back in 2023 on the publisher's home shows his 98-year-old mother visibly upset and telling officers, get out of my house. She co-owned the paper, lived with her son, and died of a heart attack the next day. Prosecutors found no evidence that officers believed they were posing a risk to her life, but they allege that the police chief obstructed an official judicial process in the weeks after the raid. He resigned as chief last October. It wasn't clear whether officials planned to charge him with a felony or a misdemeanor, and either is possible. The criminal complaint had not been filed yet. Small-town familiarity explains but does not excuse the inadequate investigation that gave rise to the search warrant applications in this matter, prosecutors said in their report. So the district attorney from Sedgwick County is one of them involved here, home to the state's largest city of Wichita. And the other prosecutor is from Riley County in northeastern Kansas. The state's attorney general appointed them after the Marion County prosecutor said he had conflict. But of course, he had questions about his behavior because as the prosecutor, it's not sure how much activity he would have been involved in, either helping draft those or at least consulting on somebody who was drafting them. The raid sparked a national debate about freedom of the press. Oh, that First Amendment. Got to go back and read the Bill of Rights. Not the whole thing, just the first one. Just the first one. Focused on Marion, a town of about 1,900 people, set among the rolling prairie hills about 150 miles southwest of Kansas City, Missouri. The director of the Freedom of the Press Foundation said in a statement that Cody should face other charges, that's the police chief formerly, in addition to obstruction of justice. The raid itself was criminal, and he is far from the only one at fault here. The publisher, that's the son of the mother who's passed away now, said in interviews grateful prosecutors found the newspaper's staff committed no crimes, though he questioned why it took them a full year. He also expressed frustration that the ex-police chief is the only official expected to face criminal prosecution. What I feel is going on here is that he's been set up as the fall guy. The newspaper's parent company and some former staffers have all filed federal lawsuits against the city of Marion and current and former local officials. So they could get justice on the civil side. A voicemail seeking comment was left at a cell phone number believed to belong to the ex-police chief. It wasn't clear who might represent him in the potential criminal case, and his attorneys in multiple federal lawsuits over the raid did not return telephone messages either. So, yeah, there's a bunch of stuff going on here. And it's possible that along with the police chief, that some of the other people were involved. That is culpable and could be charged. So maybe they could charge these people, but apparently the 124-page report doesn't address that. But what they did was the state attorney general picked prosecutors from 2 other counties and said, can you guys go in and do an independent investigation and tell us what you think? They wrote the report and they said, yes, charges should be brought against the ex-police chief. But I remember at the time when the story broke, there was all kinds of allegations about the newspaper the police were making, that the newspaper had somehow gotten a hold of some information and wouldn't say how they got that information. And so because they were making the allegation that it was illegally obtained, they had the right to go and search the offices and search the home of the publisher. And a lot of people don't know this because they've only seen searches on television, okay? So if you've seen the Thomas Crown affair, the police guy walks into the man's house, in essence, and says, I have a search warrant. And of course, Pierce Brosnan says, well, that's funny. My lawyer's right here. They hand it to the lawyer. The lawyer goes, there you go. And the people walk through the place very, very nicely. They pick up a couple things and walk out. In reality, a search warrant means the first thing they do is they grab the computers, meaning they literally walk over to a computer and yank the plugs out the back and pick it up and carry it out. And they're not going to be done with it today. They'll be done with it in a few months. You might get it back, but if they use it as evidence, you might never get it back until long after a trial is over. And I've seen searches that were executed in places where they decided to check inside the walls. And by walls, I'm talking about actual, just, imagine that wall there. Assume it was real. They decided they had to check behind that wall. What they may have to do is they may have to take a crowbar and stick it right there and pry the piece of wood off to see what's back there. If they can't see very well, they may have to pry off more pieces of wood. And they may have to slice open all the couch cushions. What if they got stuff hidden in the couch cushions? So I have not seen photographs of what these places looked like after the search was over. But they often look like a tornado went through and upended everything. And so the search itself is often extremely destructive and disruptive. And if they take your computers, for instance, and you are a newspaper where journalists write things on computers, and then the person who does the layout on the computers, and you create digital files that then get printed and sent someplace for printing, losing your computers probably shuts the business down. And my understanding was that it did. Now, I don't think they were shut down for very long because I think other newspapers stepped in to help them because everyone understood what a travesty this was, that the police come in and bust up a newspaper because somebody's feelings got hurt because something got publicized, which, by the way, it wasn't that big of a story except for the person or 1 or 2 people who are involved in the story itself. And to be honest with you, I've already forgotten what it was. But of course, now they'll always be remembered as being at the center of that crazy case where the police busted up a newspaper. And then the chief of police who's in charge of that raid could get charged, and it looks like he's going to get charged. There you go. So it made the news because it was so outrageous. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to go, gee, that's not how you handle that. And I've mentioned this before. Detroit News, Detroit Free Press, the 2 big papers in Detroit. I delivered the Free Press as a young man. And I know the name of their attorney. Now, there's businesses out there. You said, Steve, quick, name the attorney who represents, YouTube. I don't know. Why would I know the name of the attorney for the Free Press? I'll tell you why. Because they often go to court defending their reporters. But the reason they're in court defending their reporters is that the police in Michigan will do it the right way. So let's suppose the Free Press runs a story and they have a story and they say, here's something we've discovered. And they tell the story and they go, sources told us this. And authorities come by and they knock on the door, figuratively speaking, and say, we need you to tell us who your sources are. And can't do that. Well, they don't get a search warrant and bust up the Free Press offices. They walk over to a court and they ask a court to order the reporter to turn up the source. And when they get that in front of a judge, the judge looks at it and goes, okay, there is a law enforcement angle here that has some value to it. But there's a First Amendment value too, which is more important. And more often than not, the judge goes, no, I'm not going to let you harass this reporter and hold them in contempt because they won't tell you who their source is. Because if they give up their source in this one story, they're never going to be able to get sources to talk again. And it turns out that that story most likely has to do with government corruption. That's the crazy part, how often that's the case. But backing up here, the point is that there is a process to do it. And the correct process was they needed to go to a judge, not to get a warrant, but they needed to go to the judge and say, we think this person has some information. We think they should be required to tell us who it is. We want you to drag them in here and force them to tell us. And a judge then would have looked at all the affidavits and the information and then asked some questions and said, wait a second. This all has to do with, I think it was a driving record of somebody. Really? This is all about? No, I'm not going to order that. But the point is that they asked for the warrant, they got the warrant, and they thought, well, once we get a warrant signed off by a judge, we're good to go. Well, if you get the warrant by fudging the facts in the affidavit, you're not good to go, especially if somebody comes after you, including prosecutors from other counties who are appointed to investigate you based on what you've done. So I don't know what became of the ex-police chief. I have no idea. We do talk on this channel quite a bit about police officers who bounce around from job to job. And by bounce, I mean they get fired here and they wind up over here. They get fired there, they wind up over here. And apparently, I don't think anybody cares about the resumes of cops. Or maybe it doesn't count against you if you got fired. I don't know. And so a lot of people are speculating that like once this kind of died down, this guy might be able to get a job over here, over there, obviously, whatever. But facing criminal charges, and if he got convicted of obstruction of justice, that'd be a hard one to hire an ex-police chief from someplace else who was convicted of obstruction of justice. Oh, yeah, his resume is good. He's got a couple blotches, but who doesn't? So, again, from the top, I told you, these things take time. Sometimes they take forever. And who wants to live forever? Prosecutors plan to charge former Kansas police chief over his conduct following newspaper raid. John Hanna wrote it. Joshua, H, Robert, Chris, and Mike were the first to send it to me. Thank you very much. Questions or comments, put them below. Otherwise, talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. It is a mistake to allow any mechanical object to realize that you are in a hurry.